This segment of Naperville Sports Weekly is brought to you by the Daily Herald.
We're here at Benet Academy with girls soccer head coach Gerard Oconer. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So actually getting out to a nice day for once. What's the team dynamic so far been like this year?
So we had 10 of 11 returners start, so there was a lot of familiarity from last year. We were an extremely young team last year. So I think we were able to get off to a much better starting point. We didn't have to review a lot of things that we did last year. A lot of the girls understood the system already. Even though there was a coaching change, Bob Gross is still my assistant, so not much has changed with that.
Now, being that you are a first-year head coach for the program, it's not unfamiliar to you, 14 years as an assistant. What kind of differences are you implementing now that you're in charge instead of having to learn under Bob?
Just trying to vary up some of the things that we do at practice, just to make it a little bit more fresh, because obviously we've been doing things a certain way all these years, which has worked well for us, and it's not a matter of changing those things, but refining them a little bit, just to keep things interesting for our players so they don't get too bored at practice.
Now, with Bob being an assistant, like you mentioned, does that play into how you coach, or does he give you any sort of tips, or does he have any suggestions for you as well?
Absolutely. Actually, before this interview, I was just actually up there talking to him about practice, not only for today, but going forward for the next couple weeks. So I'll bounce some ideas off of him. He'll give me a list of things that he thinks that we probably should work on, and then we'll collaborate together to come up with a practice plan. And that's really helpful, especially as a first-year coach.
And you mentioned you have a lot of returners from last year's team, a team that won conference for the first time outright in a while. So don't get the same result as you wanted for conference this year, but how do you take what the girls have learned over the 2 years into the bigger picture of regionals and the state tournament?
Really the big thing is that you can't take any game for granted, especially in the state tournament, because it's one and done. So they've experienced kind of the disappointment from losing some of those conference games, and we've actually bounced back pretty well from that disappointment and from the Naperville Invitational. So I think we'll be ready for the state tournament. Talking
about that Naperville invite, obviously that's a real good factor into seeing where you're at coming around with the state tournament. You're not going to see a lot of those teams because you're in 2A this year. But how do you take your performance in that tournament and spin it in a positive way?
Well, it obviously identified some of the things we need to improve on. We got a chance to look at different combinations to see what would work and what hasn't been working. So I think that's helped us over the last week and a half, because we've obviously had much better results since the tournament.
You are going to see a couple other teams along the way as you finish out the season with Matia Lions and Hinsdale Central, 3 teams that are pretty big in the 3A sectional. How do you schedule all those upper teams like that, and does that help for what you're about to encounter in 2A?
It absolutely helps, because I don't know if we're going to be seeing competition as good as those 3 schools in the state tournament throughout the whole thing. So just getting used to playing against quality teams like that and the speed of play, if we can continue that on in the state tournament, it will really help us. So the way we try to design our schedule is to try to work our way towards those tougher games towards the end of the season, building into the state tournament.
Getting down to 2A, is that help or hurt the girls, I guess, when you see that you don't have to be in the sectional of death, I guess, as you can call it, with all the other Naperville schools?
Well, technically in 2A, we're in our own sectional of death. So,
okay, go.
Really the top 4 seeds in 2A, in our section in particular, could win the sectional, and they're very quality teams. You've got teams like Nazareth, who won their division in the Pepsi tournament. We've got St. Francis, who's already tied Naperville North. We've got a quality Hinsdale South team that's been very good this year. So even though we don't have to go through the Napervilles and maybe the sectional isn't quite as deep, there's still very, very good teams that are going to be very difficult to get through.
Getting to the regional championship last year and losing to Naperville North, what did you hear from Bob tell the girls, and how did they respond? How do you think they've responded after that loss last year?
Well, I think out of last year's loss, especially a 1-0 loss to Naperville North, who was arguably the best team in the state all season. I think that showed our girls, especially our younger ones, that we can pretty much play with anybody. It's just a matter of trying to get over that next hump so we can start winning those types of games. So I think the girls had a much bigger belief that we could start beating those teams this year.
Now, you've had some games where you've scored 5, 6, 7 goals in a game, and then you've had a few shutouts. So where do you find that consistency scoring?
Yeah, I mean, really we spread out our scoring pretty evenly across the board. We don't really have one dominant goal scorer. We actually have 3 girls that have double-digit goal scoring this year. Last year we only had 1. So it's really harder for teams to focus on one in particular player because we do spread it out pretty evenly. And any kid on our team, especially in the front, they can put the ball in the goal.
That St. Charles East game to start the season, another team that's obviously could go deep in 3A. Were you able to learn anything right off the bat from what your team could be?
Absolutely. I mean, the first 20 minutes, you couldn't ask for a better start to a coaching career. I mean, we're up 2-0 on a team like St. Charles East, who's one of the best teams in the state.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to hold on to that lead. So, you know, it kind of made me realize that we're still a little bit young. We still had a lot of work to do throughout the season. And I think the girls really kind of focused on that and, you know, really worked hard in practice to make sure situations like that didn't happen again.
On the back end, who are some of the girls that you're really focusing on making sure that they're strong, you know, on either the line or even if it's Anna Keefe, you know, in goal? Who are you looking at to really bring that back line together?
Mary Kate Wilhelm, Claire Bumpus are center backs right now, and then right now we have Erin Flynn and Kate Flynn on the outside. We had to move Erin from the front to the back because unfortunately we had an injury in the back this week, so we're having to shift some people around. But I think the communication has been a lot better over the last 5 or 6 games ever since the Carmel game, and you know, based on our results, I think we've only given up a couple goals in those last like 4 or 5 games.
Now, Katie Giesier was the player of the year in the conference last year. She was one of our player profiles just recently. So how have you been able to lean on her to really, you know, keep this team together and see where they can go later in the season?
I mean, Katie's the definition of a great leader. I mean, she was one of our captains last year as a junior. We've known Katie forever because her older brothers played here. She started camp here coming into 7th grade. So she's been like another coach on the field. Anytime I ever have any questions and bouncing off ideas, you know, I go to her. Because I mean, she's a really good go-between between myself and the players, and she's so well respected by everybody, coaches, players, parents. I mean, she's the kind of kid that you want Benet soccer players to be like.
And we're talking with Betsy as well. So how has her impact been on the field as well?
I mean, with Betsy, anytime she touches the ball in the attacking third, something good usually happens. Whether or not she sets up a goal or scores a goal, I mean, she's a threat every time she touches the ball. And in high school soccer, that's what you need to be successful, is those 1 or 2 difference makers.
And for you, you've been part of Benet Academy for a long time, but you wouldn't know by just looking at you, you know. So getting a chance to see where the program started and now to where it's at, how do you view what the progression has been of Benet soccer?
I mean, the great thing about Benet soccer has been the consistency. I mean, it's just been excellent from the day that Henry Wynn started both the boys and the girls programs. The boys program has obviously experienced a little bit more success in the state tournament, which is where we're hoping to get to with the girls program. You know, with the guys finishing 3rd in the state this year, we're hoping to follow that and hopefully get a step further.
Did the girls look at that and say, this is where we want to be, this is where we can be?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, we always talk about opportunities, and this is one great opportunity for us to, you know, be able to make a deep run in the state tournament this year.
With the fact that you've been part of Benet for so long, and this is a tight-knit group. I mean, obviously, families and cousins and everybody, and your brother has been part of this as well. So, how different do you see Benet compared to some of these other schools?
I mean, just because of the whole legacy and just the tight-knit community, all our alumni, they usually come back to, to visit. Some of them help us out during practice. Some of them actually come back to help us coach. We actually have one guy from the boys team that's coming back to help us starting next week when he comes back from college.
There you go.
So that certainly helps. So I mean, there's just a lot of respect for what Henry Wynn did building this program, and just I'm hoping to continue what he did and what Bob Gross developed and expanded upon.
Well, Gerard, I want to thank you for joining me today. Good luck in the playoffs, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, and thank you for all the coverage for girls soccer. Appreciate that.